his personality. I think we can speak about the technical aspect of a player, but I think it's more the personality. A player that is always available. He's got the physicality to cover a lot of ground. He creates lines of passes with the centre halves very, very quickly.
Roberto Martínez, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure, Aaron.
We've just obviously watched Seattle Sounders versus PSG, a well-deserved 2-0 win in the end for them. But I think there was a couple of things that we particularly liked, and particularly around one specific player in Vitinha. We've got some great clips that I'd love for you to talk us through and work through and help us understand the importance of his role and his role within the PSG side. If we take a look at this first clip, I'd love for you to take us through.
Well, absolutely. I think we need to remember that Paris Saint-Germain is the team with the biggest amount of possession in this tournament. You can see here Vitinha quickly giving lines of passes with the centre halves, and he gets very, very well involved very quickly to dictate things in Paris Saint-Germain. And from these areas, he can play short, but here's a great example how he uses the width, really good quality switch of play, and you get your winger into the box. When we see in the flexibility that it was interesting in this game was the positions that Vitinha took. Is almost here in the line of three. We see more in a number 6 position, opening those lines. He can receive behind the strikers, but then giving that freedom to Nuno Mendes, and he drops into that line of the centre halves. As you can see here, what that does, it frees all the players. Here now Nuno Mendes is higher up the pitch. It gives a little way of attack for the two midfielders, Fabian Ruiz and Joao Neves. And as you can see here, it creates a completely different playmaking ability from Vitinha. So as the clip develops, you will see that he gets on the ball and he can find that width on the side. He waits for the striker to jump, and now you got a numerical advantage in the wide areas. He keeps that position, and that's what's interesting, because he's always available to get on the ball again. He receives it again. Now he's going to use the switch of play going into the other centre half, and that's what affects by his position. Is away from the play, but is now in this sort of area. You got Fabian Ruiz dropping into a more number 6 position, and that creates a completely different picture for the Seattle players to be able to defend. So his almost discipline on keeping that position with the back three allows the PSG to have a completely different way of penetrating with the two midfielders, the false number 9, and that creates constantly 4 or 5 players available on the ball, and Seattle cannot get close to any one of them until Paris Saint-Germain changes the pace and gets into the final third. One of the points why PSG found it so easy to keep the ball and get to the levels of the 75-76% of possession.
And one of the other things that I'm particularly interested in is why also it was Vitinha that they chose to play that role.
I think it's because his individual quality. He can turn, he can receive the ball. His personality. I think we can speak about the technical aspect of a player, but I think it's more the personality. A player that is always available. He's got the physicality to cover a lot of ground. He creates lines of passes with the centre halves very, very quickly. He's got that mobility, and then he can turn in very tight spaces. So his technical quality is suited for a player that he changes constantly his position on the pitch, opens the lines of passes, and is always somebody that is going to maintain and keep the ball flowing and giving a rhythm to their possession. But what we see in today's game is something different, and I think that clip will show us the moment that, and is that flexibility that we spoke about. Fabian Ruiz, so the typical back three, Marquinhos, Pacho, and Nuno Mendes. We got into a picture where Nuno Mendes is allowed to go forward. It's Fabian Ruiz that he drops into that position, and probably that's the trigger to free Vitinha. And that's something that we've seen today that we haven't seen in many games, is when the ball gets played into Fabian Ruiz in that more false centre position. Look at the movement of Vitinha, which is an incredible deep room as the ball is traveling out wide, and by just that simple move creates a 3v3 in front of the defensive line of Seattle. So as that movement gets between the lines, it's very difficult for any player to track it, and you create a numerical advantage in front of goal, where very well executed ball just leaves in front of goal a 3v3 in a very, very difficult moment to predict for a player.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Normally you get a lot of situations where it's the second striker that is going to defend the deepest midfield. In this case, look at the timing and the perfection of that run, and is the ball played. It's well defended by Seattle, but it's a situation where it could have been ending up with a numerical advantage in the box for Paris Saint-Germain.
It's not that simple to set that situation up because it isn't like the space always exists. It's a combination of Vitinha, of course, seeing the space, but also what the other players do in that scenario to free up that space, open up that space for him to work through. So I'm interested to, if we look at that clip again, to get a bit of an understanding of the movements that other players make, the timing, like you mentioned there, and when and why and how that happens.
I think you can see that this is not a decision of a player. This is not an intuitive, good decision by a player. This is a well-worked concept. When the ball gets played now from Fabian into the outside area, it's just almost that when the ball gets wide, is that penetration from Vitinha will open up the space, and is the striker, is the midfielder. It just gets crossed 3 defensive lines with very difficult to be defended because the ball is out wide. The ball goes out wide. It's almost on the blind side of the 2 midfielders, as you can see it here. It's very difficult to pick. And the hardest thing that you see is that ball gets played to the player that he makes a run.
Yeah, of course.
That's what it shows that is a concept that is run. The moment that the ball goes out wide, it's almost that they expect the penetrating run. And that makes it very difficult to defend because normally Seattle, I'm sure that between the 2 strikers and the midfielder, would have been the responsibility of not allowing the midfielders of Paris Saint-Germain to play forward. When you get a player from that deep area breaking at the back of the 2 players that they had the responsibility, it becomes a surprise for the back 4 really to defend.
Great. And the 4th clip highlights another aspect that we saw in the game in terms of his role as well, which is slightly deeper situation, slightly more players involved here, but again, a vital role that he plays.
It is, but that will be a bit more what we used to in his central position. But what's interesting is that he drops between the centre halves. Now he's got a connection with the other midfielder. João Neves plays the ball back, and it's almost that the whole compact team of Seattle, just with 2 moves, which is the switch of play of Vitinha using the width of the pitch with Paris Saint-Germain, is again that central movement by the midfielder that is totally on his own. And because of the quality of the wide players, when the ball gets wide, it will attract 2 defenders. It will attract the fullback and it will attract the wide player, and even the centre halves. They are more focused on the false 9 than any runs from second line. And this is a beautiful clip, just the timing of that switch of play from Vitinha, that it goes to Hakimi, and it's 2 touches, and it's exactly the time that João Neves needs to cover from the halfway line. You can see João Neves now right in the halfway line. It's that connection with Vitinha, deeper the build-up, is dragging the 4-4-2 of Seattle. That ball will come from João Neves. It's almost the trigger now when Vitinha can use the full width of the pitch. Look at João Neves in the center. He's going to get between the fullback and the center half, and he's unlucky not to hit the target. But just a great move of 2 passes, a good running behind, and a great understanding as a team. It breaks down 10 players of Seattle.